I knew you'd come. So you found out you're not a businessman after all.
Just a man.
An ancient race.
What is up, people? Just a few thoughts for you. Just a few thoughts on my way home today. Cold brew in hand, getting my brain going, getting my little stimulus in, thinking, you know what? Gaming is still the Wild West of modern media and entertainment, isn't it? It really is. Crimson Desert has proved that. Crimson Desert completely embodying that cowboy spirit to push to a new frontier, a new horizon. And it's as if that frontier is the medium itself of gaming. It's not something that's a temporary phase. It's not something that could ever fully be settled. In this digital landscape, the frontier is forever expanding. It's not limited by landmass like the U.S. was during the westward expanse. Eventually you hit California and it's over. Then civilization catches up and monotony sets in. And you become the last of an ancient race, like they say in Once Upon a Time in the West. Excellent fucking movie. My God, such a good movie. Such a good movie. But isn't it true? It's truly a frontier medium. And it will be a frontier medium forevermore, if I may be so bold. It won't ever be condemned to an algorithm or some type of magical formula. You're going to get settlers here and there. There are going to be little pockets of civilization. But people will pack up and move overnight, just like that. They don't have to stay anywhere. There's always a new horizon. So this is different for the other mediums we already know very well established. I mean, gaming is the youngest medium of entertainment, you could say, of major entertainment. But paradoxically, it's also the most complex. You know, film eventually learned the grammar of cinema. Music learned how to do, bridge, chorus, intro, bridge, chorus, in terms of pop music. Books, learned how to write a book in a formulaic way, more or less, whether it's, the hero's journey or whatever kind of template you want to use. But games, the argument continues, like what is even a game? Yeah, great question. Yeah. What is a game? We have to define what is meant by game. That's the best Jordan Peterson I could do. Horrible impression, but that's the best I got for you. I didn't mean to get all Jordan P on that one. But what even is a game? Oh, God. Sorry about that. So you can spend $300 million on these projects following every best practice in the book according to the data sets and still have a flop on your hands. You've probably seen a dozen videos at this point about Ubisoft, about BioWare, about Bungie, so I need not go into all those details. Sony ever chasing the live service, et cetera, but even like Square just not being able to fulfill what their fan base actually wants in any meaningful amount of time. The length of time we have between Final Fantasies now is absurd compared to when I was growing up. And we're getting Final Fantasies that are not even connected to the main line being the main thing. Like they're putting all their, what do we say? Is it ducks? Yeah, I want to say ducks in a row, but that's not right. They're putting all their eggs in the basket of Final Fantasy VII Remake still. Anyway, so if gaming could be reduced to an equation, certainly these companies would have figured it out by now. And the Wild West thing is even more sincere of an expression when you look at games like Minecraft or Among Us or Pal World or even Clair Obscur. None of these games I've played, by the way, although Expedition 33 is on the docket. These games that seemingly come out of nowhere, right? With following no particular trend, and in fact, maybe hearkening back to something else. I mean, Expedition 33 is, a modern callback to certain Final Fantasy tropes and things like that, and this is what people liked about it. Crimson Desert is also doing some kind of callback to a sensibility with gaming, a cowboy spirit with gaming, a let's try this, let's just go for it idea. And none of these games arrived looking the way they do by market research, more or less, as far as I can tell. At least not to the extent that you get these CEOs that don't even play video games thinking they're going to start calling the shots, et cetera, because they think it can be operated the same as any other major entertainment industry, which leads me to another thing I hate going on in gaming is the Hollywoodness, the Hollywoodification, if you will. I know it's not a word, but I'm going to say it, of what's going on in games. I think that we need to steer clear of that. I know it's easy to be suckered by cinematic storytelling and great voice acting, and I don't necessarily have an issue with that. But when it becomes kind of the selling point, that's where I'm, I got to draw the line. It's good to have those things. I'm not saying it necessarily takes away, but when it becomes the selling point, I think is an issue. I think if you ask me, I haven't played any of the Death Stranding games yet, and I know there's people that really like them, but I think a major part of Kojima's mindset is to add as much Hollywood into his games as possible, and I'm just not falling for it. I just don't like that idea. I don't want it to be this almost a movie experience, if that makes sense. I mean, I liked the Metal Gear Solid games, but that's because they were kind of like, not everyone was an actor, but now in these Death Stranding games, it's like every character model is some famous person to an extent. So anyway, that's another tangent, but the problem is that gaming really, it sits at this intersection between technology, art, systems, psychology, you could say social interactions, people like doing it for an online experience. And movies only need to be watched. A book only need be read. Music only need be listened to. But games need to be inhabited. I think that's a key word. They need to be lived in. They need to be how you move from point A to B. You're never going to be able to pin that down. It needs, other than it needs to feel good, to do so. Doesn't matter how beautiful a game is standing still. As soon as you start moving, if it gets choppy and stuff like that, doesn't matter if the writing's good, doesn't matter if the soundtrack's good. It's not a playable game, and therefore it fails the one tenet you need to be a video game, to be a good game, is to play well, more or less. So it makes everything really unpredictable. And honestly, players themselves are not able to articulate exactly what they want beforehand. I think the Final Fantasy VII remakes are a nice example of this. But that's a different video. But, so this makes it very, it makes it kind of a brutal market reality that we, you just can't really judge it very well. And you get these AAA companies trying to chase trends that are already dead. They're already dying. And they're like, let's put this in development. It was a success. And then it takes them 10 years to put it out. And you're like, no one cares about that anymore, man. And that's what I'm saying. That's why the frontier is the medium. You have to be a trailblazer. The breakout hits are not some mathematical equation that's going to guarantee success. They weren't promised to us 3,000 years ago. Unless you're operating in a very niche market, your audience, and there are those types, You could broadly, you could say like first person shooter, or something like that. It's very clear what you're going to get with that. My opinion is you've got to be a trailblazer. That's what I'm saying. The frontier is the medium itself. You have to be a trailblazer. You have to be on the edge. You have to be on the avant-garde. And I don't mean the artistic, it's avant-garde. That's not what I mean. I mean on the very edge, on the forefront. And video games is one of the last places we can be frontiersmen, which is technically that's a better technical term than cowboy. The other part of the forefront you need to be on is what Pearl Abyss is doing with Crimson Desert, and that's constant updates, constant player interaction, feedback, making adjustments based on player need. That's the other part of the forefront you need to be on. You need to understand that it's not a movie ticket that people buy and then your process is over. Gamers have a way higher expectation. If they're going to spend $70 on a game, they're not going to be pleased if you just ditch it day one with all these issues. So yeah, by the time these corporations identify a successful formula, they get all the funding they need, they get a studio going, they spend 5 years building a response. Players' tastes have changed. People have packed up and left that dusty town. It's a ghost town now. That's what would happen in the West. They would become ghost towns. People packed up and left to something more fertile, something better along the horizon. And another interesting framing of it is like how Hollywood developed its studio system and how that kind of stabilized Hollywood. They figured out how long movies should be. They figured out how to market their stars. They figured out how genres function, how audiences generally consume films. Like I said, you buy a ticket and you watch the movie for 2 hours. Now and the process is over. They mathematically figure that out. But there's something about it that makes sense for filmmaking because it's akin to telling stories over a campfire. There are, you could call them quotations, proper ways to tell a story, to set up a story, to do a payoff that are always going to work. So anyway, Hollywood figured out how to do it, how to stabilize their industry to a formula. That's where you got the golden age of film and all that stuff, the studio system. But games still have a lot of fundamental unresolved questions. Should stories be linear? Should they be emergent? How much should the stories even interact with you? Is it multiplayer or single player? What's the future? Multiplayer or single player? And it's like they're always trying to figure out where it's just going to end. And it's like that's the thing. It's the Wild West of entertainment. It doesn't end. It keeps expanding. There is no end point. There is no California. I want to put that on a t-shirt. Some things are going to work at some point and some things are not going to work. And it's kind of hard to say. I mean, you can operate off of general parameters and genres and such. It's just funny. They're always trying to figure that out. Is it going to... Live service is the future. They've been proven wrong how many times now for that? But what are players even paying for? Is it the world, the mechanics, progression systems? Is it just the social interactivity with people? Is it they just like the story that much? Is it a product? Is it a service? Is it a hobby? Is it a platform? Is it a platform? Oh my God. There's a word I hate. Platform, yeah. But anyway, every few years, the industry seems to answer differently to these questions. And that's what creates this frontier kind of aspect to it, this Wild West nature, is that the answers can be so varied on what is going to hit and not hit. But the thing is, in the American West, you would follow the river to get where you're going. And you'd lay down railroad track. And that was a sign that things were being prosperous and you're setting in these things. But the problem with gaming is that as you're laying down the railroad tracks, the river has switched its direction on you. And now your train is going to nowhere, you know? So, if that makes sense. So, that's what I mean when I say the frontier is the medium itself. There's one little companion point I'll make to that, is that it does still feel like gaming is in its punk era in a way. And what I mean by that, or maybe it's just beginning in a sense. There is this kind of more vocal rebellion to these AAA companies trying to assert their dominance, so to speak. But gaming still have this punk mentality, this kind of, in both ways. In the audience way, which is where people vote with their wallet very loudly, you know. They decide whether a game lives or dies, which we've, you know, with Vanguard, no, what is it? High Guard, Concord, what's the other one that did nothing recently? The Bungie one. But anyway, Marathon. None of these games have any interest to me. I just know that they're huge flops. And the fact that you could have people in a garage creating an indie masterpiece that millions of people are going to buy, you know, like Minecraft, like Vampire Survivor or something like that, you know, something that scratches a particular itch. It can go both ways. And what was the essence of a cowboy anyway, other than someone rebelling against the need for permissions from civilization, from society, telling them how to eke out their own life? They just said no to all that. They just said, no thanks. No permission needed. And you can still do that now. You can still make a game without anyone's permission, without funding, without any of this stuff. And of course you could do that through movies and music and stuff like that as well. But it's a little bit actually, it's probably a bit harder because of how stabilized those industries are. It's a bit harder to break through with them. And so a lot of music that is made indie stays indie, but games that are made indie can blow up and become mainstream events in gaming. So again, Crimson Desert is embodying this kind of cowboy spirit, a cowboy mythos, which is the Lone Ranger riding off into the sunset, into the horizon, into the frontier, to carve their own path, not followers, work alone. And though they come in and you could say they repair things, they're a type of repairman. And you could say that Crimson Desert has, to some extent, repaired a certain belief in the gaming sphere, one that believes in a company that works for the players. You know, the way that Pearl Abyss acts with its audience, the way they respond to feedback and make very timely updates consistently. People will offer up excuses. Oh, it's because they worked on MMOs, so they're used to it. No, we could all be used to it. You just don't do it. But it's kind of like that annoying thing I see online all the time, people talking about the gaming space is healing. We're finally healing. I mean, I know they mean it in a good way, but it's just annoying me to see the same thing again and again and again. It's like, come on, guys, can we say something else? But it's kind of true in this case. Because in a sense, Crimson Desert is restoring something. A certain faith that you can get a game like Crimson Desert still. Yes, it has its faults. It's not a perfect game. It's got levels of jank. It's got, you know, crazy things going on. But it has still that essence, that cowboy spirit. And what's interesting is that in a cowboy-oriented story, generally speaking, the cowboys are shit on by civilization. Civilization types. Those of the establishment of the town. And you can already see where I'm going with this probably. It's like, how shit on was Pearl Abyss by the establishment, the powers that be? And Pearl Abyss is the outsider. They're the lone gunman walking down the dusty road of the town. Everyone's glaring at them from their porch, side-eyeing, going, who is this guy? What's going on here? You are an unknown factor. We can't handle that here. We need our games to be mathematical equations. We have a DJ Khaled button. It says another one and another one. But it's just about maintaining their sphere of influence, which maintains their share of the market. They can't have some outsider come in and start disrupting their system they think they're building. They think they've got it figured out. So generally, cowboys are shit on by civilization, but they were also acting as this restorative element. Girl gets kidnapped. This is a John Wayne movie. A girl gets kidnapped by Cherokee or something like that. John Wayne has to go and chase him down and return the girl. And he's not really liked. He's just the one to get the job done. And ironically, he's the one to restore the faith in civilization by putting the family back together. Who creates society? It's the families. And ironically, it's the loner who has no family to restore that benefit to the world. He, of course, very famously and symbolically doesn't enter the home after returning the girl. He simply watches them through the doorway. He doesn't get to cross that threshold. That's where civilization is. He's on the other side of that. And he simply turns and walks away as a cowboy does. And I know it's, I'm probably making this way more epic than it really is. It's probably not this deep at all, but there is something similar to Pearl Abyss coming in and saying, here's Crimson Desert. Here, gamer crowd who has been so jaded by constant AAA failures and money grabs that let me restore something for you. Let me restore the idea of a gaming company that cares. And because we are not in development ourselves, many of us who play games, we are settlers. We're people living in the towns who get to experience the cowboy passing through. And though, I'm really stretching points here to make it fit the analogy. It's not a one-to-one analogy, but it is in the sense that Pearl Abyss is the unknown factor here. They are the outsider attempting to enter a AAA space with a AAA level game as a AA studio. And the powers that be, the already established sheriffs of the town and heads of households and the bankers and everyone else is like, hey, who is this guy? They're the ones shouting them down while simultaneously trying to utilize them for all they're worth. And mark my words, there will be mimicry of Crimson Desert, despite them trying to shun it out of existence. They're going to be very curious how a game like this sells 5 million copies, so they'll be looking into it. And I wouldn't even be surprised if Crimson Desert spawns its own Souls-like terminology, which I would not be a fan of, but I would not be surprised if it happened. Because of how weird of a soup it is, it's going to spawn its own type of genre tropes. And it just proves that gaming is still a Wild West. You can still break through if you're willing to embrace the frontier, embrace carving your own path and not being a follower. That's it. That's all I can say. Just my thoughts walking home. What do you think about that? All the best. Like, share, subscribe. Bye.